large, and though it took me some time to get the hang of it, to understand how exact each instruction and ingredient needed to be perfect, over time I became very good. A neglected Dante cornered me one afternoon in Graham's pantry when Mrs. Stewart was grocery shopping, and Graham was at a friend's house playing cards. "I'm busy making macaroons," I told him, warding him off with my hands when he tried to move close. "You made your point," he said, catching me when I tried to go past him and back into the kitchen. "I won't eat anyone else's cookies." There was a smile in his voice. He was teasing me. "I'm busy," I said again. My voice came out almost sing-song lyrical, like a taunt. I hadn't quite meant it that way, but I wasn't all that sorry. Teasing him back when he was in this kind of mood rarely disappointed. "You're not, but you're going to be." I eyed him insolently. "What's that supposed to mean?" He crowded me deeper into the walk-in pantry, one step and another, past the long shelves until my shoulders hit the wall at the very back of the room. "Oh, I think you know. Macaroons are off the menu for today." "You don't like macaroons?" "Right now, I hate macaroons." I bit back a laugh. "Now you hate macaroons." "I hate everything you bake, if you ignore me to do it." "Fine then, you can't have any." I tried to move past him, to leave, but he got in my way, bumping his chest into mine. "Excuse me," I said. "I don't excuse you," he said, and there was heat in it, past teasing into outright foreplay. "Let me out," I ordered. "No," he taunted back. "You can't keep me in the pantry forever. What's your plan here?" I renewed my efforts to squeeze past him, rubbing against him in the attempt. With a groan, he backed me up to the wall again, this time advancing until our bodies were flush, and I could feel, beyond a doubt, what he wanted to do. He gripped my ass with both hands, hoisted me against the wall, and said, sounding nearly out of breath, "I think you can guess." He slanted his mouth over mine, and I was lost. It was some time later, and we were straightening our clothes when I said smugly, "So you know that you basically promised me you wouldn't eat anyone else's cookies." His smile was warm as he crowded me back against the wall, rubbing his big, hard chest against mine. "Angel, I promised you that a long time ago." Chapter 8. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? William Shakespeare. Present. Scarlet. I was drunk. Good and stinking drunk. We were at the Crew Hotel in Seattle. Not my favorite town. On a layover, and we were trolling the lobby bar. Okay, I was trolling the lobby hotel. My girls were just there for moral support. I was planning to make up for the fact that I'd just spent a solid month being a pathetic, lovesick fool, moping in my room, crying in my bed, staying at home, hating myself, wanting to disappear. But I decided tonight that I was done with that. I was on the hunt for a stand-in punching bag. I had decided about 3 drinks ago that I'd feel much better about myself if I put at least one man between me and my last memory of Dante. I was looking around, a pout on my face. "No cute boys," I told the girls. Demi agreed. "I'm not sad," Leona said, studying me. "I don't think I want you to find a cute boy when you're in this shape." They were sitting in a booth, and I was standing next to it. I was not in a sitting mood. I was in a get-some-male attention mood. I just wished there were some males around worth being noticed by. I'd already shot down 2 that just weren't cute enough. More specifically, reject number 1 wasn't tall enough, and reject number 2 looked too wholesome. I didn't like wholesome. Never had. I craved sinister, categorically. Don't speak too soon, Farah said, eyes aimed at the door. I'll let you have him if you want him, but damn, I sure don't want to. I turned to see, and smiled. It was my lucky day. Either he was actually looking for me, or it was a hell of a coincidence, but Dante's half-brother, Bastian, had just walked in the door. He was standing there, scanning the room, and it didn't take him long to zero in on me. He grinned. I tilted my head and grinned back, then pointed my chin at the bar, heading there with a bouncing little strut. He beat me to it and watched me approach, his eyes all over me. I was glad I'd turned myself out well. My minuscule nude dress was basically man catnip. It hit all the right buttons. Deep cleavage that left very little of my abundant breasts to the imagination. Short skirt that showed off my sky-high legs. The whole thing was fitted to show off my flat tummy and hourglass figure. Pink platform stilettos and sexy bedroom hair didn't hurt my situation. And my makeup had been on point before I'd gotten sloppy drunk. Who could say now? Who could care? Not me. I felt sexy as hell either way. Hello, stranger, I said when I got within earshot of Bastian. You look good enough to eat. And he did. 3-piece suit, dark, messy hair, 5 o'clock shadow, a handsome as hell Durant face, and a devilish smile. Yeah, he'd do. Look who's talking, he retorted, eyes on my catnip dress. My God, woman, you are trouble, aren't you? I went to hug him, because drunk, and breathed into his ear. You have no idea. Unfortunately, I don't. He sounded truly regretful about that, as he put his hands on my hips, and set me back, just the slightest bit. I'm sure you've guessed, but I came here to talk to you. How did you know I'd be here? I asked him, cocking my head to the side. His mouth twisted ruefully, and when he did that, he reminded me so much of Dante that I wanted to smash something over his head, and cry, and run away, and kiss him. Facebook. You and your friends love to share your locations, and, you know, I live here. I scrunched my nose up. Facebook stalking me, are you? He was unapologetic. Yes, it's a helpful tool. Actually, I was going to fly down to see you soon, but this worked out much better. Well, it did if you're up for a serious talk that I'd like you to remember in the morning. I'm not up for a serious anything, I told him, and, because drunk, I pressed my mouth to his. He made a little noise in his throat, a hungry one, and I licked his lips, brushing my breasts against him. He set me away, but he was breathing hard. You taste good, I told him. He smiled, but not like he was happy. Do I taste like revenge? Exactly like that. Yum. Trust me, you beautiful, edible, dangerous creature. I would love to take you up on that, but it's a line we can't cross. There's no line I won't cross, I said, meaning it. I was feeling self-destructive to a dangerous, limitless degree. God, do you know what he did to me the last time I saw him? I heard a bit about it, Bastian said solemnly. That surprised me. What did you hear? And from whom? He sighed. From Dante. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that he's in rough shape. That bit of unfair bullshit only made me more determined. I moved closer, and he let me. I rubbed up against him, my lips in kissing distance of his again, teasing him. Let's make it rougher for him, huh? Jesus, he said, and it reminded me so much of Dante that I wrenched away. I leaned against the bar, flagging down the busy bartender. He didn't make me wait. In fact, stopped what he was doing and came to do my bidding with a smile. I'd been flirting with him all night, but he wasn't my type. He was tall, but his shoulders weren't broad enough. Still, the right smile got me some amazing service. "Hey, Scarlett," he said, his tone when he said my name making it sound like we were old friends or new lovers. "Another Black Label for you?" "You're the best, Benny," I told him, leaning forward, shamelessly teasing him. "Can you make it two?" He nodded, eyes on my cleavage. "Anything you want, gorgeous." "Wow," Bastian whistled when Benny moved away to get our drinks. "If I was Dante, I would lock you up." "Well, that's not what he did," I said, and it was an effort to keep my voice steady. "He threw me away. Again." "Oh, Scarlett," Bastian sighed. "I have a few things to ask you, and so much to tell you. I'm not sure just how drunk you are, but I'm pretty positive that what I have to say will sober you up." That was an understatement. What he had to tell me didn't just sober me up, it changed everything. Chapter 9. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt. Past. Scarlett. I was so mad I was shaking. It had been a hell of a morning. It was my own fault, I knew. It was a Saturday. My grandma was off work on Saturday and Sunday, and on every single one of her days off, no exceptions, she went into a calculated and steady drunk. She was unpleasant and surly when she was sober. Drunk, she became outright hateful, and if I was stupid enough to stick around, I was automatically the go-to target for all of her animosity. When I was being smart, which was most of the time, I didn't come home until she was passed out cold, and I left quietly in the morning before she roused. This morning was one of the exceptions. I'd overslept, somehow even more so than her, and boy was I in for it. Of course I'd been out late with Dante, out doing all of the things that would drive her the most crazy, and she always seemed to know it. But this morning was worse, because instead of her usual tirade where she accused me of things she couldn't prove, this time she'd actually found something to vindicate her venomous rant. In our defense, Dante and I had hidden the evidence. The crazy woman must have gone outside and dug into the trash can to find the handful of used condoms that she threw in my sleeping face. "At least you're the kind of whore that uses protection," she spat. I was still blinking awake, automatically batting off the sticky objects that she'd flung at me. When I realized what I was touching, I recoiled, my face drawing tight in distaste. "What the?" I grumbled. "I suppose you think I should be happy? You're one step up from your slut of a mother," she continued, screeching the words. I wasn't sure what smelled worse, the day-old plus used condoms, or her breath, which was a combination of her usual halitosis mixed with vomit and liquor, a particularly putrid, if familiar, stench. "What time is it?" I asked her, voice flat, even, not letting her know that no matter how old I got, she still terrified me. "What are you doing up already?" My casual tone just set her off more. "What the hell does it matter what time it is?" "Because usually I'm gone long before you wake up from one of your blackouts. Did you ever notice?" I got a sharp slap across the face for that bit of sass. "That's all you have to say for yourself? Not even defending your behavior now? Shameless!" I supposed she was right. I was a bit shameless about what went on between Dante and me. I just couldn't see it as wrong. Maybe a part of me even wanted to rub it in her face. She'd been telling me I was going to be a whore since I was too young to know what the word even meant. Now here I was, a sex-obsessed teenager that spent as much of her free time as possible underneath or on top of her equally sex-obsessed boyfriend. I wasn't sure if you could really call me a whore for having sex with one guy, no matter how many times we'd done it, but I knew my grandma would have no problem doing so. "You know there's something wrong with you, don't you?" she asked me, voice gone deadly calm, which I knew from experience was even worse than her shouting. "You're the one digging around in trash cans, looking for used condoms," I muttered back. Sometimes I just couldn't help myself. I was rewarded with another ringing slap, and then another. "You think you're so smart," she said, punctuating the words with another slap. "But you're as stupid as your mother. You think you're special, spreading your legs for a Durant? Every girl in the county gave it up to his daddy, and I'm guessing the son's not much different. That boy is going to use you and throw you away. Just you watch." "I'll take my chances," I told her stubbornly, not so much as flinching from her slaps. "Your mom threw you in a dumpster because even she thought you were trash, but that's not what made you trash. You've done that to yourself." And there it was. Her slaps weren't the terrifying thing about her. Her words were without a doubt her best weapon. She didn't just exploit weaknesses, she opened them wide, put her unfeeling hands inside, and sifted through you until she unburied new ones, uncoiled them, and let them plop down at your feet. You, I tried, but my temper and my fear and her damned slaps had gotten the better of me. I was so frustrated by it that I just got up and left, wearing nothing but a now soiled t-shirt and the first pair of jeans I grabbed off the floor on my way out. I couldn't even get to a bra. She was blocking that part of the room with her body, and I needed out, now. "Good, get out," she shouted at my retreating back. "But remember, if you're running to that boy, he doesn't care about you. He thinks you're trash, too. You're just the little trailer girl he sticks it in. Mark my words. He'll leave you for one of his own kind, I promise you that. He's never gonna stay with some piece of filth that came from the dumpster. Especially not a slut like you that gives it up for free." I ran and didn't look back. I was trembling in rage as I made my way up to Graham's house, but in the short time it took, I'd nearly calmed myself, because I knew that as soon as I saw Dante, I'd feel better. That was the point of him. He made the world make sense again, with just a look. I was so caught up in thinking about him that I forgot I was a complete mess. I remembered again as I caught sight of a pristine-looking Dante. He was already at Graham's house, hanging out in her front yard, wearing a suit and tie, his hair combed, parted, and slicked back. Oh, that's right. He'd had some country club thing he'd told me he had to attend this morning. He hadn't invited me along. He never did. He claimed I'd hate the country club, and I believed him. I didn't care about any of it, how clean he was, or how filthy I was. I nearly ran as I made my way to him. But as I watched, the front door of Graham's house opened, and out came Tiffany, looking even more pristine in a lacy white dress. I stopped in my tracks, lingering at the tree line, feeling my temper begin to reboil. She beamed at Dante, and he smiled back, his hands in his pockets like he didn't have a care in the world. She said something I couldn't make out, and he laughed. My vision went red, and I must have made some noise because Dante, finally, noticed me. His smile didn't falter. In fact, it widened, and he said something I couldn't hear to Tiffany and started moving toward me. I began to back away, painfully aware of the picture I made. Bed mussed hair, slapped red face, in a tight, soiled shirt with no bra. I couldn't have looked more different from the two of them in their country club uniforms if I'd been trying to. Still, Dante didn't even notice at first. He was already talking as he approached, too intent on what he was saying to notice how I looked. Listen, I have an idea. I think you and Tiffany should spend more time together. I had a long talk with her. When? Why? I interrupted without even meaning to, moving deeper into the woods. What the hell was going on? Hadn't we been over this? Never, I would never give that girl a chance. She caught me on my way out at the country club brunch this morning, and I gave her a ride. She asked me to hear her out, so I did. She's never done anything to either of us. She has nothing to do with my mother's schemes. She's as baffled as we are about the things my mom claims. We had a good laugh about the fact that my mom says I'm going to marry her after college. Trust me, she's no more interested in that than I am. I was glaring at him, hands clenched at my sides, and it was only after he'd finished talking that he seemed to notice something was wrong. Well, something other than the idiocy he just spouted, that he had to know I wouldn't be swallowing as easily as he had. Tiffany wanted him. I knew it in my bones. Like recognizes like. He blinked a few times, eyes running over my face and down my body. He took a step closer, his hand darting forward, almost unconsciously, to palm one of my breasts. It was a casual touch that spoke of absolute intimacy. He was so accustomed to having me under his hands that it was second nature at this point. His brows drew together. Why aren't you wearing a bra? Do you realize how revealing that top is like this? His mouth twisted up in distaste as his roaming hand made contact with one of the still sticky stains on my shirt. What's all over you? I wanted to punch him in the face. Long story, I gritted out. I didn't feel like telling him anything. I was just too frustrated by then. The morning couldn't have been going worse. He wiped his hand on his immaculate suit, then brought it back, this time slipping it under my shirt to fondle me. He backed me farther into the woods, until we were well hidden. I woke up dreaming about last night, he said, voice thickening, eyes on his hand inside my top. I wish you could have been with me. He stepped closer. I wish we didn't have to sleep apart. It seems wrong, doesn't it? He had no idea. I'd have given anything for that. Also, he was a master at manipulating me. He'd nearly made me forget why I was so upset, with just a few drugging sentences. Still, I tried to rally, to get back on point. It's semen, I answered his earlier question. What? He asked sharply, his hand still kneading at my breast, his thumb rubbing circles around my puckered nipple. On my shirt, it's cum. My grandma went digging through the garbage can outside this morning, found a bunch of our used condoms, and woke me up by throwing them on me. His free hand came up to finger my cheek, and he seemed to notice my face for the first time. She was slapping you again, wasn't she? I shrugged, dislodging his hand. Does it matter? Of course it matters. If she's putting her hands on you again, I'm going down there. What are you going to do that you haven't done before? Even if you talk sense into her, she'll forget it all the next time she's drunk. Are you okay? I shrugged again, not looking at him. I'm fine. Code, of course, for not fine. We're going to go down there, and I will call the police. You think that will help? Last time we did that, she turned it on me, said I was hitting her, and nearly had me arrested. Fuck, he cursed, because he knew I was right. The cops were never on my side. I'd been in too much trouble to ever ask the authorities for help. Well, I'll walk you down and keep her away from you while you grab some clean clothes. In the meantime, though, take off your shirt. Excuse me? He grinned, shrugging off his jacket, loosening his tie. "I'll give you mine. You shouldn't have to wear that dirty one for another second." He was already unbuttoning his before he'd finished speaking. I took off my shirt, and in spite of everything, or maybe because of that, the way his eyes moved on my bared body, I was suddenly ravenous for him, insanely, madly starved. I licked my lips, hands going to the button of my jeans. "Dante," I rasped. He dropped his shirt and jacket on the ground, crowding close to me. He still had his undershirt on, unfortunately, but I took care of it in short order. "Do you have anything on you?" I asked, rubbing my chest against his. He was flushed and panting into my face. "Yeah, I was just about to come find you." He pulled a wad of condoms out of his pocket. "Please, please get on the pill." I'd had some weird paranoia about my grandma figuring out I was having sex if I went through all the steps of getting on the pill. But that cat was evidently out of the bag. "Okay," I panted, stroking him through his slacks. "I will, soon as I can." We didn't even kiss, which may have been a first, but I was too far gone. I braced my hands against a tree as he worked my jeans off, got us both ready, and took me from behind. He kneaded my breasts, mouth rasping in my ear as he pushed into me. It was quick, but still more tender than rough. I came with a fast and quiet intensity, shutting my eyes tight, barely making a sound. He came louder, much louder, calling out my name as he rooted deep and finished. He was still rutting inside of me, milking out every last twitch when he stiffened suddenly. "Fuck, Tiffany," he said, voice pitched loud. That, of course, made me stiffen. I was craning my neck around, heart already wounded with just 2 words. Absolute murder in my eyes. Had he really just said Tiffany? I couldn't quite believe it. But as my eyes caught on movement in the woods, it all made sense. There she was, backing away, eyes wide. Our gazes met an instant before she turned and fled. "What the fuck was that?" I asked no one in particular. "She accidentally walked up on us, I think," Dante said, coming way too fucking quickly to her defense. "She couldn't have known we'd go 20 feet into the woods and start having sex. She clearly doesn't understand us at all, then. We need to stop doing this. That's twice now someone's been creeping on us in the woods. I don't like it." As he spoke, his weight lifted off my back, and he slipped out of me. I turned, leaning my back against the tree as I looked up at him. "I can control myself if you can." It was probably a lie, but one I doubted I'd ever be tested on. As though proving my point, his eyes were on my body, one hand going to cup my breast, the other to my sex. "Did you get off? You were so quiet I couldn't tell." I bit my lip and lied. "I didn't." "I'm sorry. Want me to take care of you?" he asked, voice gone quiet and dark. He moved closer, thumb circling my clit as he pushed a finger inside of me. I gasped and nodded. "Please, Dante," I pleaded, because he loved that, and as a sort of penance for the selfish, pointless lie. I hadn't had to make him feel guilty to get him to go down on me, but for some reason I'd wanted to, needed that element of repentance in his touch. He wasn't the only manipulative one here. He lowered to his knees, perched one of my legs onto his shoulder, and buried his face between my thighs. He pushed 2 fingers into me and went to work on my clit with his tongue, his free hand sliding up to fondle my breasts. I gripped his hair with one hand, the other covering his on my chest, feeling at my body with him. There was something unutterably sensual about experiencing his touch on me through my own fingers. I was calling out his name less than quietly. eyes pointed beseechingly up at the sky, when a movement caught the corner of my eye. My head snapped to the side. It was Tiffany, again, peeking at us from behind a thick pine. I glared at her. She smiled back, turned, and fled, again. Dante was standing, wiping his mouth before I told him, "Tiffany came to watch round 2. He looked infuriatingly confounded. "What? Are you sure?" I was so pissed by that, by the fact that his mind worked that way, that somehow me imagining seeing her was even vaguely possible, that I just stopped talking. I shrugged on his shirt, put on my jeans, and started walking determinedly back to my grandma's trailer. He was on my heels. "Why would she come back? I don't get it." "To see you naked," I almost replied, but bit my tongue. It was becoming apparent that he needed to figure out for himself who and what Tiffany was. I was sick and tired of trying to show him myself. I'd lost all patience. He dropped the subject, which was for the best, because I was brewing for a fight. Chapter 10. Women are meant to be loved, not to be understood. Oscar Wilde. Thankfully, my grandma was passed out cold when we got back to the trailer. Dante waited for me on the sofa while I showered and changed into clean clothes. I was rubbing my wet hair with a towel as I walked out of the bathroom. "Let's go see a movie with her this afternoon," he greeted me with. I knew what and who he meant immediately, though I wished I hadn't. More like I hoped I'd misunderstood. "What? Who?" "Tiffany. I think we should all go out. Grab a movie and pizza or whatever." I met him with my best drop-dead glare. "No. Hell no. Just try, this once. For me." It only took a few words to take all of the steam right out of me. "For you? She's that important to you?" I tried hard not to let him see how much that bothered me. "Oh, stop. It's not like that. I honestly believe that you two will be friends. You could use some more friends, Scarlett." He said it kindly, and so it hurt all the more. Ouch. He hadn't been trying to be mean, but the pity in his voice was worse to me than just about anything else. And I was furious again, that he didn't see her for who she was. For God's sake, she just spied on us having sex. Twice. And still he thought she was some innocent girl who wanted to be my friend. I knew very damn well that Tiffany wanted nothing so much as for me to disappear forever. I knew it, in my gut, in that bitter little spot where instinct and hunches go to flourish. Still, in this instance, my instincts did not seem to be enough for the both of us. I'd let him see for himself. "Fine," I gritted out. "What time?" "The movie's at 1:30. I tried not to grit my teeth when I realized he'd already planned the whole thing. With her. I was about to lose my temper, but I held on to the very last thread of it as I spoke. "Fine," I said again, cursing him in 1,000 different ways in my head. "I'll meet you there." His brows drew together. "No, I'll take you, of course. What are you even thinking?" "I'd like to be alone for a while," I said, trying to be reasonable when I wanted to scream at him. "I'll meet you there," I repeated. "No," he repeated, making every thought about being reasonable fly right out of my head. "I'm not leaving you here," he said firmly. "Are you kidding me?" Glenda's passed out cold. It'd take a miracle to wake her up before 4 p.m. And besides that, I'm planning to lock myself in my room and read. If she gets up before I leave, I'll climb out the window. You don't need to worry about me. He stood, the look on his face telling me that he was finally beginning to comprehend how badly he'd messed up. My last sentence had clued him in. Don't, Scarlett. Stop. I'll cancel, okay? Let's go to Graham's. I'm not leaving you here. I raised my chin. You are. Go. I'll meet you and Tiffany at the movies. He started cursing, and I left him to it, locking myself in my room. How will you even get there? He eventually asked me, voice muffled through the thin wall that separated us. He'd been standing there for a while. I pictured him clearly on the other side of it, eyes closed, leaning forehead first into the door. I hated that question, hated that I didn't even have a way to get around, that I was so dependent on him, and had never even given it a thought until now, because we did everything together. Like I said, you don't need to worry about me, I told him with stilted bitterness. I can figure out how to get to the movie theater without your help, Dante. I just hadn't done it quite yet. I'd gotten my license, but I sure as hell didn't have a car. Could I borrow my grandma's and have it back before she woke up? I wondered. She'd kill me, I decided instantly. She was absolutely possessive about her junker of a car. She'd only ever let me be a passenger in it maybe 5 times, let alone drive it myself. The thought was laughable. Still, I wasn't backing down. I was too far gone. My temper was officially running the show. Dante made a noise of utter frustration. You know what? Fine. I'll be back to pick you up at 1. I wanted to punch the door. My fists were clenched in preparation for it. Don't! I won't even be here by then. Like I said, I'll meet you there. My mouth was working independently of my brain, it seemed. I felt separate from the words, like they had more meaning for him than me. This made sense, I supposed, because half of what I was saying was for effect alone. I really had no way to make it the 30-minute drive to the movie theater. Eventually, he left, and though I told him to, that did not help my temper at all. It got worse the more I tried to calm it, simmered hotter the more I tried to turn it off. It was unfortunate that Reese McCoy just happened to call my house right when I'd nearly talked myself out of going at all. Reese had been persistently pestering me for at least a year. I'd never encouraged him in any way whatsoever, but I knew he had a crush on me. He was a nuisance, but at least he was nice to me, which was more than I could say for most people. I told you not to call me again, I told him right away. It came out naturally. I'll tell Dante that you're bothering me if you don't stop. I'd told him this at least a dozen times, but I'd yet to actually follow through. Dante would pulverize him, and I didn't truly believe that he was anything but harmless. But then Reese, in his timid voice, said, I just wanted to see if you wanted to go out or whatever. We could, go to the mall or whatever. It was ridiculous of him to ask, but no one could fault his timing. On any other day, I'd have skewered him for asking. But today, well, I really needed a ride. Do you have a car? I asked him. I swear I felt him smile through the phone. Do you know Tiffany Vanderkamp? I asked Reese when he picked me up in his old Toyota truck. That rich, new girl? Yeah, I've seen her. Doesn't she live close to here? Too close, I thought. She does. Do you like her? He was driving by then, but he looked away from the road to shoot me a guarded look. She's all right. Why? She's going to be at the movies. Maybe you could take her out afterwards? He chewed on his lip for a long while, finally getting up the courage to say, I'd rather take you out afterwards. I rolled my eyes. You know I'm with Dante. Not right now you aren't. Right now you're in my truck, if you didn't notice. That shut me up. I'd just gotten into a car with a guy I barely knew, just to piss off Dante. I was helpless, and I'd done it to myself. The thought was sobering. Luckily, Reese didn't pull anything, taking me straight to the movies like I'd asked, unaware that I was bringing him on a double date, whether he liked it or not. Or a trap, depending on how you looked at it. But I wouldn't be letting him drive me home. Something in his tone had me worried. He was definitely less of a pushover than I'd always assumed. Dante's reaction was predictably gratifying when I walked in the door with Reese. He wouldn't even look at me. His cold eyes were on Reese. "Let's take this outside." Tiffany, who'd been standing next to him, watched the guys leave, looking troubled. "I tried to bring you a date," I told her. "I guess it didn't work out." She studied me. "I don't mind being a third wheel." I smiled at her, and it was smug. One thing I could guarantee, Dante would stop setting her up to be my friend now. "I mind. One thing I also mind is you watching us having sex. Do you even know how sad and pathetic that is? How desperate?" Her nostrils flared. I'd finally found a crack in her fake, pleasant facade. Good. I'd been looking for a while now. "What can I say?" As she spoke, her voice changed. Her entire demeanor did. It was fascinating and reminded me, like a light bulb going on, of his mother. "He is awfully nice to look at, even if you did keep getting in the way of my view." "Like I said, pathetic," I said in disgust, though deep down what I felt the most deeply was satisfaction. Finally, she was showing her true colors. "Look your fill, but that's all you'll ever get." "You really think that?" she said slowly, tasting the words. "You're confident, I'll give you that. You're wild in bed, sure, but you're also a manipulative bitch. How long do you think that will keep him entertained? How long do you think it'll take him to realize he could do better?" I really hated that her words made me ask myself that same question. It was spooky how much it felt like I was speaking to his mother. Every nuance of her words was crafted in the same way. She had that precise, killer, imminent threat to every syllable of her speech. And exactly like Adelaide, she had a talent for pointing out an insecurity you didn't even know you had. She created insecurities. Just like with his mother, I held that against her. By this point, I had a whole list. "And when he does, I'll be right here," she continued. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm very patient." "He doesn't even think you're interested in him," I told her with incredulous hostility, though I wasn't sure who that was aimed at. Dante, most likely, the blind fool. Yeah, okay, it was definitely aimed at him. "Good," she said, the word filled with warm satisfaction. "I don't want him to. He'll come to me when he's ready. Just you watch." I almost punched her, but I managed to maintain my composure enough to just walk away. Dante came back inside sooner than I'd have thought possible, and looking mad enough to breathe fire. He strode right to me. "Okay," he gritted out. "Message received. We'll stay away from Tiffany so long as you promise me you'll stay away from Reese McCoy." "I promise," I told him solemnly, feeling like I'd finally, at last, been heard. Sometimes drastic measures pay off. "Let's get the hell out of here," he said, snagging my hand. I smiled at Tiffany while he made our excuses, turning my head to hold her glaring gaze with delight as he wrapped a solicitous arm around my waist and pulled me outside. I felt like I'd won, because back then I didn't know it was more than a battle. It was a war. It was sometime later, deep into the night, before I brought it up again. Dante was in a much, much better mood by then. We were in the back seat of his Audi, parked deep in the woods, several miles from his house. He was on top of me, catching his breath, kissing my temple every so often, his big, firm, edible chest right in my face. I wriggled underneath him, and it made him groan. He was still inside of me. I need to get home, I told him.
No, he said as he pulled out. Not happening. I'm keeping you.
I was in a serious mood, but that made me smile. Promises, promises. He kissed me lightly.
Seriously, though, it's not right that we can't sleep together. There has to be a way. I'm moving in with Graham. I think you should too.
You think I wouldn't love that? But my grandma would never agree, and I'm not 18 yet. He kissed me again.
We'll find a way.
I didn't share his optimism, but I kept my peace. He was driving me home when I asked, "She's crazy. You know that, right?"
Who?
Tiffany. Duh. He didn't roll his eyes, but it was close.
Yes, I'm aware you don't like her.
She's a clone of your mother, I told him. Maybe that would get through to him. It didn't. He just looked more annoyed.
Please, you're exaggerating. Tiffany is harmless.
Famous last words, I thought dramatically at the time. But I was more right than I knew. Chapter 11. Don't allow your wounds to transform you into someone you are not. Paulo Coelho. Present. Scarlet. I woke up feeling strange. I was at home, in my own bed, but I didn't know what to do with myself. I checked my phone, saw several missed calls and texts from Bastian, and recalled that I'd promised to call him the day before. Had an entire day passed? It didn't seem possible, but it must have been. I'd woken up the day before in Seattle with a raging hangover and an aching heart. What was I supposed to do now? As though answering the question, my phone began to ring. It was Bastian. "Hey," I greeted him.
"Are you okay?"
he asked, sounding more worried than he should have.
Was I okay? No. Was I going to be? Who knew?
Not me.
"I'm fine," I told him. Girl code for don't ask a silly question, of course I'm not okay. I still need to do some digging around, and I have more questions for you, but I just needed to make sure you were all right.
"Where's Dante?" I asked.
"Here, somewhere in Seattle, I believe. I'm going to try to find him today."
"Find him? You didn't tell me he was missing." It seemed like something that should have come up, considering how much we'd talked that night.
"I told you, he's been having a rough time."
I didn't bother to point out that one had nothing to do with the other.
"Listen," he told me somberly. "Don't do anything rash. Don't confront anyone. In fact, it would be best if you act as though everything is normal. I still have a lot of digging to do. The less they think we're on to them, the better."
I felt a little nauseated. This man was kicking a beehive, and he didn't understand, not fully, what was about to come out to swarm him. But what he was doing, I needed it done.
"I won't confront anyone," I assured him. "Everything will stay normal on my end. Good luck, and thank you." "You don't have to thank me," he said, something hard entering his voice. "I'm doing this for myself as much as anyone. I'll be in contact soon."
I felt strangely better after we hung up, a little lighter. My stomach grumbled, and I realized I was hungry. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had an appetite. I was digging through the fridge, scrounging up breakfast, when Demi arrived home with some woman I'd never seen before. Both had armfuls of groceries. Demi beamed when she saw me.
"This is my friend Moonbliss. We met at Om Nom Organics last week and hit it off."
To be fair, Demi hits it off with everyone, and if I guessed correctly, she'd just adopted another lonely person. They came from all walks of life. I greeted her friend politely, even though I could tell with one glance that she was one of those. Sallow complexion, thin to an unhealthy degree, wide, glassy eyes, undyed, untreated, product-free brown hair. She was a vegan. No, worse. Much, much worse. A juicer. A raw vegan juicer. Also moon bliss?
Oh, you're having breakfast, Demi noted. Perfect timing. We're just about to cook something.
I eyed their reusable grocery bags dubiously. What were you about to cook? Moon Bliss looked horrified at our exchange. Cook? Oh no, we don't cook. Cooked food is valueless food. We prepare. I was too tickled with amusement to even think of rolling my eyes. What were you about to prepare? Green shakes. Sounds delicious, I said dryly. Moon Bliss didn't catch the sarcasm. Oh, it's simply nirvana. I make it with goodness greens and activated almonds. I was still mouthing activated almonds at a confused-looking Demi when Moon Bliss spoke again. Would you like one, Scarlet? You look as though you could use some brain dust. Brain dust? I wasn't asking about it so much as trying the words out in my mouth. Did you just say brain dust? Wait, what? Are you serious? You don't partake of brain dust? Was I serious? It was getting harder and harder to give her straight answers, but the longer I let her go, the better the payoff. Clearly. Was it made by a virgin? I asked, deadpan. On the third day of a new cycle? Demi bit her lips to keep from laughing, looking away from me. Moon Bliss gave me a look that told me I'd just made her moon decidedly less blissful. Do you want one or not? Are you making anything else? I asked, hopefully. Maybe something with solid food? Or even meat? I consider myself a purist, Moon Bliss explained haughtily, and there's nothing pure about meat. A good steak tastes purely awesome, I offered. I don't eat anything with a face. As humans, I think we've evolved past that, don't you? I sure as hell hadn't. Oh, me? I don't eat anything that points west. That's asking for trouble. She studied me with narrowed eyes for a moment, then went back to her preparation. I took a seat at one of the bar stools lined up against the counter that faced into the kitchen. Amos crowded my legs, and I patted him absently. He licked my knee, and I let him, because he did it with love. I felt a little bad for making fun of Moon Bliss, so I said, I'll take a green shake, thank you.
Moon Bliss has been teaching me to prepare some amazing recipes, Demi told me brightly. She's about to publish her first cookbook.
I was not the least bit surprised. That's great. Congratulations. What's the name of it? I'll be sure to pick it up. My sole mission is raw, healing the wounds in the universe, one human digestive tract at a time. I blinked. That's a mouthful. Oh, look, I made a pun. Even Moon Bliss laughed at that. I guess even she liked puns. This shake is best complemented with an hour of Kundalini yoga. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I actually did know what that was. But there's simply no time today. Tomorrow morning, Demi?
Sure,
Demi said. Damn, she was a good sport.
Want to join us for yoga tomorrow?
Demi invited me. Yoga had never worked for me. I was a boot camp fitness kind of girl. Running, push-ups, sit-ups, squats. Things that hurt, but did the job. I kept it simple. Oh, no thanks, I said blandly. I like to do mind yoga. Mind yoga? Moon Bliss asked, rightfully suspicious. I just think about it really hard until the results manifest themselves. At least it cracked Demi up. Can't please everybody.
It took Moonbliss for freaking ever to make the shakes. She talked us through every step, but it was so complicated that I doubted I'd retain one bit of it. There was no sugarcoating it. The shake was horrible. Everything from the color to the taste to the texture, but I drank it anyway. It was worth the price of admission for this crazy train. Also, I'd been treating my body like hell lately, and it couldn't hurt to start remedying that. Baby steps back to being a normal human again. As we drank, Moonbliss, she opened up and admitted her parents had actually named her that. Poor girl had never had a chance. Walked us through her day-to-day eating. It sounded very time-consuming and confusing to me, and I liked cooking. Oh, but wait, she didn't cook. I guess I just wasn't that into preparing. When do you find time to manifest your heart's purpose? I broke in cheekily at one point, just to let her catch her breath. She didn't skip a beat. I was kind of impressed. Oh, that's easy. I never miss my hour of Kundalini meditation first thing in the morning. It's crucial to the progressive cultivation of my soul. Crucial. She was a bit of an acquired taste, much like her green shake. One thing I could say about her, though, she loved Amos. A lot. She couldn't keep her hands off him after she finished her shake, rolling around on the ground with him, rubbing his tummy how he loved. Amos, as always, couldn't get enough affection, and I had a soft spot in my heart for anyone that could love our homely, adopted mongrel. I think your dog is my spirit animal, she said at one point. I just about choked on my shake, but recovered quickly. Mine is that half-empty Costco-sized bottle of Patron on the counter. Moonbliss gave me an odd look, but let me have it. What about you, Demi? Yeah, what about you, Demi? I repeated. I never thought about it. Maybe a purple unicorn? A baby one. I smiled at her. Damn, I liked her. We had grown particularly close lately. I chalked it up to her tender heart, especially when it came to wounded creatures. She had a way with us all. Moonbliss couldn't stay long. She had a lot of world wound healing still to do for her soul mission before the sun set, but she was thoughtful enough to write down some recipes that would energize my chakras before she left. She handed the piece of paper to me with a flourish, as though it were a prescription. Always, for you, add spirit dust. You need all the help you can get for the path to inner peace. Fair enough. No one had ever accused me of being peaceful. I studied the list. And if you're having a craving for sweets, dose yourself with a bit of bee pollen. It's divine. Is bee pollen vegan? I asked, just for the hell of it. My soul feels untroubled by it, she said, by way of an answer. Doesn't that make your chakra sticky? I almost asked, but held back, if only barely. Buckwheat soba noodle salad, roasted kabocha soup, denuded feldspar, all of these should be staple meals for you. Should they be activated or regular? She cocked her head to the side and studied me like I was the weird one. Or maybe she actually realized that I was messing with her. I pray your afternoon is as carefree as a juniper breeze, were her parting words. Bye-bye, I said back. See you tomorrow, Demi replied. You don't like her, do you? She asked me when we were alone. I was surprised she'd gotten that impression. I do, actually, and I like having her around. She puts my improv training to good use. I'd had a good laugh, but it did get me thinking. I had not been taking care of myself lately. Usually I tried to practice a good balance of exercise and eating healthy, with a dash of alcohol on party nights. I needed to start taking care of myself again, because I needed to start caring about myself again. Is she for real? I asked Demi. Did you set that up just to mess with me? I found her looking hopeless in the produce section.
Her boyfriend dumped her for a younger woman, and she's feeling lost. All of her energy is going into finding something, real or fake, that makes her feel better. She can be opinionated and eccentric, but she is a nice person, and I want to help her. You know me. I just like to help. It gives me purpose.
Well, hell. Schooled by a 22-year-old with a pure heart. You'd think it'd be demoralizing, but it was actually kind of enlightening. It never felt bad to just be nice to people. In my case, I knew I needed to start with myself. Are you going to try one of those recipes for us tonight? I asked her. She flashed a dimple at me with her smile. If you do, just please, for me, be sure that the buckwheat has been de-hulled by an Amazon chieftain during flood season on a blood moon. It's very important. I couldn't help it. Being a smartass was part of my DNA. We both lost it, laughing until tears were running down our faces.
Got it, she gasped. And you don't have to worry about the feldspar either. I'll make sure myself that it's denuded by a virgin during flood season, and pointing west, of course.
I wasn't the only one who'd had improv training.
That sounds like something that will boost my blood irony levels, I said in parting, feeling something akin to carefree for the first time in I didn't even know how long. I'd been planning to spend the day marathoning Vanderpump Rules so I could feel better about me and worse about humanity, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose that I refused to blame on the green shake. So I went for a long, satisfying run instead. Chapter 12. If you would be loved, be lovable. Ovid. Past. Scarlet. He'd done it again. Made me so mad I couldn't even look at him. He'd promised that he wouldn't have anything else to do with Tiffany, that neither of us would. But then right before last period, he'd mentioned oh so casually that she was coming over to Graham's house for dinner that night. Her parents were out of town, and he didn't think she should have to eat alone. It felt like a double betrayal, since Graham was in on it. Did Graham like Tiffany now, too? How long before they both preferred her to me? I couldn't stand it. How insecure I felt. How completely Dante disregarded my feelings out of consideration for someone else's. I didn't even confront him. I just walked away. He followed me to my class, then to my desk. I sat down, looking straight ahead. "You're upset," he said, and had the nerve to sound annoyed. "Go away," I said stiffly, just as the bell rang. Dante's class was across campus, nowhere close, so we had no choice but to drop it. "I'll be back before practice. Don't take off," he said in a tone I found insufferable. He'd have had more luck ordering me to take off. "We're going to talk before you blow this out of proportion." I glared at his retreating back with absolute murder in my eyes, waited a beat, just long enough for him to leave, and stood. My history teacher, Miss Banks, called my name once, then again. "Not feeling well," I told her. "Going home." She didn't try to stop me, though I'd probably regret it later. My attendance was always a problem on account of me hating school and loving to leave it before it was over. I made my way home almost blindly, looking down at my feet, following the trail, my mind somewhere else. Several places, in fact, but mostly on Dante's reaction when he realized I hadn't stayed put. He'd be pissed. He'd likely even skip practice to confront me right away. Pathetic as it was, I hoped he would. I needed, over and over, like a broken record, for him to show me that he'd never get sick of me, no matter how flawed I was, how insecure, how unlovable. I had never made peace with being abandoned. I was certain that I never would. I still looked the reality of it in the face every day, wondered why I was so worthless, Wondered when I'd be abandoned again. My response to that was to unleash my helpless rage on the one person who would take it, who wouldn't leave me, who cared enough to chase me when I ran. I was deep in thought as I approached the creek. There was a longer trail home, with a bridge over the small body of water, but when it was this nice out, it was never worth taking when you could just hop the rocks on the shorter route. It was tricky, but I'd gotten the balancing act down years ago. It was an unseasonably warm day, just a few weeks into the school year, and so I'd worn shorts. The sun was shining, a teasing breeze drifting through the forest. My mood was starting to improve the more I had some time and space away. I poised myself to take the first big lunge. Once you started, it was best just to skip straight across, no stopping. It happened fast, so fast that more of it was processed in retrospect than real time. The creek was small, but it was loud enough to drown the sounds of even a large man moving directly behind me. It happened fast, so fast, all of it. Something hard struck me in the back of the head. I saw stars, and my world took a turn for the darker. It was hours later, and I was still pissed. I'd been shuffled from the police station to the hospital. I was in a patient bed now, and they wouldn't let me leave. All I wanted to do was go home, shower, and curl up into a ball. But I had a bad concussion, so that would not happen until tomorrow at the earliest. And in the meantime, 2 cops, one male who'd introduced himself as Detective Harris, and one female who'd introduced herself as Detective Flynn, were asking me the same questions over and over again. They didn't seem to want my answers, because every time I answered the same question the same way, the female cop looked increasingly more disgusted. I took a strong disliking to both of them almost right away. Her first, and it started the moment she spoke to me. There was just something in her voice I didn't like, some undercurrent of hostility. No, it was more than hostility. It was judgment, cold and final. This woman had an opinion about me, and it was set in stone. I wasn't sure why I didn't like Harris at first, but I didn't. Perhaps my instincts were trying to tell me from the start that something was wrong with him. Looking back, it's easy to think so, but if it was so in the moment, I can't honestly say. And worse than all of that, they wouldn't let Dante in to see me. I'd heard him several times making a fuss about it, getting himself into trouble somewhere in the hospital, trying his best, I knew, to make it to me, but so far he was losing. I needed him to win. I needed to see his face, feel his hands holding mine, absorb his presence, comforting me. One upside, the detectives seemed as over it as I was. Finally, Flynn pulled the male officer to the other side of the room, the side with a second, currently vacant bed, shutting the curtain behind them. The detectives started talking to each other about me, voices pitched low, but not low enough. Flynn had made it clear early on that she thought the whole thing was a colossal waste of their time. "She's the daughter of Renee Thoreau and Jethro Davis," Flynn was saying. "Can we really believe any stories she's spinning? What do you expect? Who knows what kind of trouble she got herself into, and with whom? Should we just take her word for it? That some homeless guy that's been living in the woods just walked up and attacked her?" I felt my face getting red. I was so angry. "It's obvious she was attacked, and that there was a sexual assault," Harris replied. "Nothing else is relevant. We need to figure out who attacked her, and you know as well as I do this isn't the first time we've gotten a report like this." "So we're supposed to just start digging around in the woods and grab every homeless guy with a spot by the river?" Flynn said impatiently. "On her word. That girl gets into fights with everyone all the damn time. Now we have to investigate one of her altercations like she's a victim?" "Yes, we have to investigate it. That's our job. This was an assault, not a fight. Don't forget, we do have evidence. And there are several sex offenders that have gone off the grid around here.
not to mention all of the unsolved cases we're sitting on. It wouldn't be bad for us, in general, to start checking out some of the transients that have set up shop along the water. Was this what good cop, bad cop sounded like? I'd never experienced it before. All cops were bad to me. And it didn't make sense. I couldn't figure out why they'd be using this tactic on a victim. Oh wait, that's what it was. Flynn had decided I wasn't one. God, I hated cops. I hated that I'd even had to call the police. But I was furious, and I wanted the creep caught. Fine, Flynn said curtly. Let's get back to the station and start the paperwork. Okay, you go ahead. I'm going to have a quick word with her. I watched Harris warily as he approached me again, looking apologetic. I'll be back to follow up soon. He set a card on the high nightstand beside the bed. Call me if you need anything at all. I nodded, chewing my lip and looking down at my hands. Thanks, Detective Harris. Call me John. I didn't particularly want to, but... Thanks, John. Do you think this guy has done this before? I think it's very likely we are dealing with a serial attacker, yes. Do you think you'll catch him? As long as you cooperate. I'll make sure we do, Scarlett. That struck me as odd, but I was too distracted to think about it for long. You take care. I'll be in touch. He left, and Dante, finally, came in. He moved to me silently, looming over me, then softly took each one of my hands in his. I couldn't even look at his face after the initial glance. It was like staring into an open wound. I was pissed, hurt, and embarrassed, and again, pissed. But he'd gone into another realm. I knew this was his worst nightmare. Are you okay? He asked, voice shaking. Yes, I said, because it was true. I'd been attacked, yes, but I knew that it could have ended much, much worse. Who was it? He asked, and I'd known he would. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to tell him. He was too far to losing it. And if he had a clue just how much the police did not give a damn about finding the guy, he would do it himself. I knew it. Don't, I said quietly. The police will handle it. I didn't believe it myself, but that wasn't the point. I'm just a little bruised and pissed off, okay? Let's not make this a big thing. One of his warm hands had moved up to cup my cheek. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. I don't know what to do. I feel so helpless. I did not want to talk about it. It felt like I'd talked about it too much, but I figured it would be better to let him know what had really happened than to let him speculate and think the worst. He gripped my hand a little too painfully amid the retelling, but stayed very quiet and still, and I knew, without having to ask, that he was going through his own personal hell. Graham came in soon after. Between the two of them, they made a big enough fuss over me that I felt truly cared for, and, though I was embarrassed by it, I was comforted. Dante stayed the night with me in the hospital room, even after an initial standoff with my nurse. I think she decided it just wasn't worth the trouble. I was discharged the next day, and things were almost starting to feel normal again, or at least like normal was on its way. We were talking as though nothing had happened, joking, teasing each other as I prepared to leave for home. As Dante was helping me to dress, we had another bad moment when he saw my bruised torso. I glanced down at my breasts. They were black and blue. No wonder they hurt so damn much. Dante had been holding my bra, but it dropped out of his hands, his breath gone ragged. Jesus, look what he did to you. I'll fucking kill him. The nurse walked in as he said that, and she sent him a startled look. I can't wear a bra right now, I said practically. Just grab me a shirt. I'll do that, the nurse told Dante, her tone sharp, as he renewed his efforts to dress me.
He was gently sliding my arms into an oversized t-shirt as he tersely replied, "I've got her." The two didn't get along. It had been awkward since their standoff about him staying the night before. But the nurse only cared to a point. She clearly decided that we weren't worth the hassle and left us to it with one last glare. We didn't even discuss it, but he took me straight to Graham's house instead of mine, and she was waiting for us, a large corner suite upstairs prepared for me. I pulled Dante into bed with me and went instantly back to sleep. "I fucking hate that guy, the male detective," Dante said abruptly at dinner. I was surprised. He's the only one that seems like he's trying to help me. "I don't like him. I don't trust him. There's something wrong with him." I was so used to him being jealous that was the first conclusion my mind jumped to. Detective Harris was a very good-looking man, even distracted and shaken, I had noticed. And then he'd had the nerve to keep Dante from me for hours after the attack. Of course Dante didn't like him. I didn't much like him either. Chapter 13. We are terrorized and flattened by trivialities. We are eaten up by nothing. Charles Bukowski. The worst thing about the attack was how it made me question everything around me, made me see it all differently. The forest surrounding our houses had been the home to many of the good memories in my life, a source of nothing so much as joy and enchantment. But all of a sudden, it was the opposite. It was a dark and mysterious place now, the shadows more oppressive and menacing. Within a few days, I was still more shaken than I'd admit to anyone, but more or less back into my daily routine, and I thought I was happy to put it all behind me. The police would do their job, and I would go on with my life, just as before. Well, not quite. I didn't leave Graham's, and we didn't walk to or from school anymore. Dante started driving us, and I was more than fine with it. I knew I'd be in trouble as a few days passed, and I still didn't leave Graham's house. It just felt so good to stay in a place where I was wanted, so I put off going back home. Finally, I made Dante take me back to the trailer after school. If he'd had his way, we'd have just avoided the place, entirely and forever. "Go back to practice," I told him. "You can come get me when you're done." He wasn't pleased about that. "Fuck practice. I'm not leaving you." He was immovable on the subject, and I was secretly relieved. "Oh, look who decided to come home after 3 fucking days," was my greeting from Glenda as I walked into the trailer for the first time since the attack. "No word from you, not even a phone call, and you come waltzing in like you still live here." "Didn't Graham tell you?" "She's not your Graham. And you should have told me. Something like that happens and you don't even call?" I hadn't even considered it. When I needed someone, or some comfort or support, I never thought of her. "You want to stay up on that fancy hill? You go right ahead, you little brat. I never wanted you here anyway. Collect your shit and get out," she said, and left with a slam. Oh, that's right, I thought. It was Friday. I was interrupting her weekly binge drunk, and I assumed she was headed to a bar to remedy that. Dante pressed his chest against my back, leaning down to kiss my temple. "Are you okay?" I mulled it over. She told me to leave. I get to leave? He threaded our fingers together and nuzzled his face into my hair. Jesus, it's about fucking time. Just think, we get to wake up together every morning. Let's pack your stuff and get the hell out of here. I was kind of amazed at how much stuff I actually had. We filled up his entire car and we still weren't even done. But I was tired, so we quit. I could get the rest later. I couldn't quite believe I got to leave the hated trailer dump to stay permanently with Graham. I was reeling, almost giddy about it. It felt like Dante and I had been waiting our whole lives to live together. And finally, it was happening. We could be together, day and night. Just the idea of it overshadowed everything else that had happened, for a time, and I was almost lighthearted. But it wasn't meant to last. I borrowed Dante's car the next day while he was at football practice, telling him I was tired and going to Graham's to lie down. "I can skip out. I'll take you home." He looked like he wanted to. Football had fallen very low on his priorities since the attack. Everything had a silver lining of some kind. I waved him off. "No, don't bother, unless you mind me borrowing your car." "Of course not. Be careful, and I can just walk home." I was worried about him doing that. Not because I thought he'd get attacked like I had, obviously. I was worried because I thought he wanted to. He'd been relentless and had finally gotten it out of me who the attacker was. It was a homeless guy that we saw most days on our walk home. No mistaking him. Dante didn't just know who he was, he knew where to find him. I knew he'd go after the guy given half a chance. "I'll come back to pick you up," I assured him. I didn't head straight to Graham's. I had a few things yet to get from Glenda's trailer, and I figured the sooner I did it, the better. She was liable to burn the stuff if I left it there for long. I was nearly finished packing one last little box of pictures and keepsakes when I heard the loud sound of a car pulling onto Grandma's loose gravel driveway. I glanced out a window. It was an old brown sedan, and as I watched, Detective Harris stepped out of it. I was not happy to see him. I wanted the creep who'd attacked me caught, but I'd had more than my fill of dealing directly with the police. Still, I went to the door and greeted him. He smiled and asked how I was doing, citing that he didn't want to intimidate me by pulling me into the station again for more questions, which I thought was supposed to be nice. Nice, but nerve-wracking. I didn't want to be alone with a strange man after what had only just happened to me. Still, I did hate the police station. It always made me feel paranoid. I was so used to being in trouble that it just felt instinctual to stay away from a place like that. "Where's Detective Flynn?" I asked him warily. I really didn't like her. "She's back at the station, doing some paperwork. I got the impression that you'd be more comfortable without her." As he spoke, he was looking down at his notepad, jotting down something that I couldn't make out. "Can I come in?" I didn't want to let him in. Felt a powerful urge to refuse him, in fact. "Can I call my friend?" He cocked his head to the side. "Why?" "To, have a friend here with me for this." "I don't understand." "It would make me feel better." He smiled kindly at me. "I'm your friend, Scarlett, and I don't think it's appropriate to have some teenager involve themselves in an official police case. Listen, this will be quick, and I promise you it is necessary. Can I come in, or would you rather go to the station?" he asked again. "I suppose not," I said stiffly, truly rattled. "You can come in." I knew it was just the fear from all that had happened, but I did not want to be alone with this man, cop or not, or any man at all just then, for that matter. "Can I call Mrs. Durant, Vivian, and have her join us?" I tried again. She wasn't a teenager, and I knew with certainty that she'd come if I needed her. He'd been jotting something on his pad again, but he looked up at that. "Also not the best idea. All of this is sensitive information about an active case. I really can't allow you to divulge any of these details to anyone not actively involved." Should I tell him that I'd already told Graham and Dante virtually everything? Or would that get me into some sort of trouble? I wondered. "Now have a seat, Scarlett," he said, perching himself on the sofa. He patted the spot next to him. Trying not to visibly shudder, I sat down, getting as far away from him on the couch as I possibly could. "Dear girl," he said, still giving me that benevolent smile of his, "I know you've been over all of this, but I want you to do it again, for my direct ears this time.
Maybe I'll catch something that Detective Flynn didn't."
My original statement at the station had been given to Flynn alone, out of sensitivity to the fact that I was a teenage girl who had just been sexually assaulted. Where the hell was that sensitivity now? Harris shifted closer to me, and I had to fight not to cringe away.
"I know this is hard. Just take your time and explain it to me as best you can. Every detail you can recall. Details are very important, crucial in a case like this, if you actually want us to catch the culprit. You want that, right?"
I just froze, staring down at my hands. I did not want to go over it all again, and certainly not here.
"Here, let me try this again," he said gently. "I'll start with some questions, so it's less daunting, okay?"
I glanced at him, and he smiled again. He had a great smile, framed by an even greater face. His teeth were straight and white, his features even and handsome. His skin olive-toned, his eyes deep-set and so dark that his pupils blended seamlessly into his irises. I studied him closely for the first time. He didn't look like a small-town cop. He looked like a hard-as-nails, sexy cop from a TV show. Even so, I didn't want to be alone in a small space with him, and I particularly didn't want to tell him what had happened to me in detail. Mostly what I wanted was to be left alone for a very long time. But I wanted the creep that had attacked me to be caught, most of all. I didn't want to be scared every time I took a walk by myself. If I could ever bring myself to walk alone again. "Okay," I finally said, looking back down at my lap.
"Did the man penetrate you?"
I jerked at the word, bewildered eyes flying back to his face. No," I finally, and with great effort, got out.
"What did he do?"
I touched the back of my skull, eyes aimed at my lap. I didn't see him coming. Something hard hit the back of my head. A rock, I guess. And then he pinned me on my stomach. His arms reached around me, and he was trying to take off my jeans. He was clumsy and out of breath, strong, but he couldn't get the button undone. His mouth was at my ear. His whole body was on my back. I always thought he was skinny, but he was so heavy on my back.
"Don't stop," Detective Harris said when I paused for too long. "Continue."
He kept trying for a while to get the button open, and while he did that, he was grinding against me.
"Where was he grinding on you? And what exactly was he grinding against you?"
I was red with shame. This retelling was even more embarrassing than the first one, which had been horrible. "My butt?"
"Stand up, turn around, and show me where exactly."
My bewildered eyes shot to his. His eyes were apologetic.
"I know it's embarrassing, but it's for the case. I need to work through every detail, exhaustively. The more you cooperate, the more likely it is that the DA will have a good case against this guy once we catch him."
I was shaking as I stood and turned. I wished I'd worn something other than short cutoffs, but I hadn't been expecting a detective at my door. I pointed to the spot on my butt, then quickly sat down. He was watching me, studying me so relentlessly that I couldn't look at his eyes.
"And what did he grind there, right against your asshole?"
My eyes shot back up to him at that, my shame and bewilderment working together to nip at my volatile temper. What the hell was wrong with this cop? Was he trying to embarrass me?
"Answer the question, Scarlett."
I looked down at my hands. His penis? He cleared his throat.
"Was it hard?"
"I think so, yes."
"You think so? Why the uncertainty? Do you not know what a hard dick feels like?"
My snapping eyes were meeting his sympathetic ones now. Hello, temper. "I do. It was hard. Are we done?"
"Not at all. Semi-hard or hard?" Hard. Hard. Completely hard. Not semi-hard. And he was grinding it against your butt, trying to shove it in your asshole through your jeans. Is that accurate? I nodded, shaking with fury, with shame, fear. Had he pulled his hard dick out of his pants, or was it grinding against you, through his pants? Nausea moved through me, because I'd felt it enough to know the answer to that. He'd pulled it out. So it was bare and hard and grinding against you? Yes. I'm just trying to get every bit of information I can, sweetie. Details are more important than you think. Are we almost done? Almost. And you were just lying there, or were you fighting him? I was stunned at first. I think the blow to my head maybe knocked me out for a second or two, and I was just trying to breathe. He'd slammed the breath out of me. But after a while, when I realized what was happening, I started to struggle. Did he get the button undone, on your shorts? He didn't. How tight were those shorts? Were they as tight as the ones you're wearing now? I shrugged, hating that he'd pointed something like that out, wishing that my shorts were less tight. Stand up again, sweet girl, he told me, voice careful, gentle. I did it, wondering if I could refuse to do this. Whether they caught the guy or not, this interview was starting to make me feel sick to my stomach. Something was very off about all of it. Something was very wrong with this cop. He stood up, looming over me. Lift up your arms, he ordered softly. I did it, trembling. The motion brought my shirt up high enough to expose my stomach. His eyes were on his hands as he fingered the waistband of my jean shorts. So tight, not an inch to spare here. Were your shorts that day as tight as this? He asked again. Yes, I said through my teeth. I wanted to sock him, but I refrained. I had a healthy fear of police. Even I had never hit one before. Keep going. What did he do then? He started pulling at my pants, trying to get them down over my hips with the button still fastened. Did he succeed? No. Those tight jean shorts of yours might have saved you, you know. Were you a virgin? I flushed and sat down without asking. He moved to stand directly over me, and I regretted the decision. Are you a virgin? He repeated when I'd been quiet too long. I have a boyfriend. I finally gritted out in answer. It's a yes or no question, dear girl. Have you had sex? Yes. Yes, you've had sex, or yes, you're a virgin? I've had sex with my boyfriend. How many times? Just once? A few times? I blushed and shook my head. More than a few times. How many? I shrugged. I have no idea. I haven't been counting. Guess for me. More than 100 times? I glared at him. Probably. Does it matter? Yes, all of this matters. Guess a number for me, sweet girl. Approximately how many times have you had sex with your boyfriend? Vaginal sex. 200. He looked strange, like I'd riled him. I started shaking harder, wondering if I could get past him and out the door, or if he'd stop me. 200, he breathed. Are you messing with me? Like I said, I haven't been counting, but I'd guess closer to 200 than 100. My tone was defiant to hide the fact that he was terrifying me. With his dick in you? 200 times. I barely nodded. So your boyfriend puts his dick in your pussy pretty much every spare moment of the day. What else do you do? Does he fuck you in the ass? What the hell is wrong with you? I whispered at my lap. Did this other guy, the one that attacked you, put it in your ass? He didn't, I said through my teeth. Did he penetrate you, anywhere? I was blinking hard, trying not to cry. I was so angry and ashamed and confused. I felt so helpless that I didn't know how to react. This wasn't right. None of this was right.
I told you he couldn't get my jeans off.
So the jeans stayed on. What happened then?
He kept grinding against me.
His bare dick against your asshole, but over your jeans.
I nodded, glaring at him. There, I paused, and against my thigh.
Where on your thigh? Get up and show me?
I shook my head, tears pouring down my face. No, please, I don't want to, sir. Please.
Dear girl, if you want to catch this guy, you're going to have to do your part. His voice hardened. Stand up now, or I'll assume you aren't serious about catching him. Did you know we've been studying a string of serial rapes over the past decade? A violent man attacking women in the woods across 3 cities. And a few women have even disappeared. Did you know that?
I'd heard about one attack locally, but it had been years ago, and several more attacks, but not here, in other towns, if close ones. I'd never heard a word about the disappearances, though.
On trembling legs, I stood. Show me where on your thigh. Was it more toward the back? Turn around and show me.
I turned and bent, and touched the very vulnerable spot where my groin met my thigh, deep up into my shorts. He was a very large man with a badge and a gun. I was out of my depth, helpless, completely, and the way he was acting was not right.
So he got it up that high. Damn, he was close. A few more moves, and he'd have had it in.
I might have been in shock, but I went a little numb after that. My mind got a little hazy, distant.
But you're saying, even though he got it right there, one quick shove away from your pussy, he still couldn't figure it out? Still didn't penetrate you?
I shook my head, chin to my chest, eyes pointed down, tears falling silently. Not tears of sadness, tears of terror, because I felt terrorized.
What next?
He was grabbing at my chest, hard, hurting me.
Your breasts, you mean?
Yes.
He bruised you up good, I heard. He really did a number on you. How are they healing up? I bet they're sensitive. Big breasts like yours usually are.
I felt exposed, mortified. I couldn't stop trembling. The tears wouldn't stop leaking out of my eyes, and my hands went up instinctively, covering my breasts.
They still hurt?
I guess, I said. They hurt like hell. I still couldn't put on a bra.
You know, sweet girl, it's impossible for a busty girl like you to go around without a bra, without it showing. They must hurt. How tender are they?
Tender?
Okay, so he was grabbing your big, soft tits and grinding his hard, bare dick against your asshole, over your jeans, and down lower, against your thigh, right into your shorts. Just a quick prayer from that tight little pussy. It's still tight, right? Even after letting your boyfriend put it in there 200 times?
Do you have to say it all like that? Could you please try to be a little more professional? He didn't answer, and though his eyes were still kind on mine, I was quickly learning not to trust them. I was screaming by then, and struggling, trying to fight him, but it was hard being on my stomach like that.
Was he saying anything to you? Was his mouth still at your ear?
Yes, he was saying all sorts of horrible things into my ear. He called me names, a cunt, a whore, a bitch, a slut, and told me to take my jeans off or he'd kill me.
Did he have a weapon?
I never saw one.
Did he say how he'd kill you?
No.
Did you take your jeans off for him?
No. I kept struggling until, he was done, and then he got up and ran away.
Do you know what made him leave?
He was done, I think.
He finished on you.
I nodded jerkily.
Where did he finish on you? Where did his cum go? I shuddered. Turn around and show me, as best you can, where his semen went. I did it fast, pointing from my rear all the way up my back, where I'd felt it and seen it when I'd taken my clothes off. All on your clothing? Or some on your skin? Skin too. And you got a good look at him? I remember you said that, but nothing you just told me indicates that you were looking at anything but the ground. When he got up and started running, I stood. I was dizzy, but I saw him. I recognized him. He's the homeless guy that always hangs out by the river, at the bridge right by the middle school. I thought he was harmless before. He usually just ignores everyone that passes him. But I guess I'd never encountered him alone. I usually walk to school with a friend of mine. Okay, so you got a good look at him running away. Did you see his face? Yes. He looked back at me as he was running. It was definitely the same guy that's usually hanging out there. I've probably seen him on the way home from school, camped out by the river 100 times. Okay, I think we're done for now. You did a good job today, sweet girl. We're going to find this guy, I promise. I was so relieved I started crying harder. He seemed to take that as an invitation to pull me into his chest, embracing me. It was almost comforting. The size and shape of him, so big and hard, reminded me of Dante. But this was not Dante. This was a middle-aged cop who I knew I couldn't trust. Was he going to leave soon? Please, please leave soon. I tried to pull away, but he held me fast. I started to struggle, and he let me know how strong he was by bear-hugging so hard that I couldn't move. If only I could stop crying, maybe he'd leave. Hey now, he murmured into my hair. You're safe here, sweet girl. I'm just trying to help you. Just cooperate, okay? And know this, you can tell me anything. I know you're a good girl, right? I can see that. And I want you to know that if you have any questions about what happened to you, you can always come to me, with anything, okay? I just want to be alone. I gasped into his chest. Okay, I get it. But you call me if you need anything, okay? I agreed to, just to get him to leave. When he was finally gone, I stood shaking at the door, twisting the bolt again and again to be sure it was locked. I may have been in shock. I didn't feel right. I wasn't sure what to do. I felt dirtier, more raw than I had even after the attack. Somehow, this had felt like more of a violation. I took a shower and rubbed my skin until it burned. What had just happened hadn't been normal procedure. I knew that, of course. But what could I do about it? Who could I tell? The police? He was, sadly, the nicest one I'd met so far. I knew absolutely that I could not tell Dante. He was a maniac when it came to that sort of thing. He'd fight anybody. He didn't give a damn, cop or not, adult or not. He'd go after this creep and end up in jail. I was certain of it. It took a few days, but I worked up the nerve to call his partner, Detective Flynn, to try to tell her how he'd acted toward me, but she quickly put me in my place. She was not inclined to believe anything I had to say. In fact, she wanted to give me an earful. She told me in no uncertain terms that I was nothing but a troublemaker, just like my mother, who she enjoyed informing me, spite in every word, had stolen her boyfriend from her in high school and was still feeling the sting of it. Just my luck. And who else did that leave? The sheriff? One of the other cops? It was just a list of people that hated me, that thought I was trash, people who had become absolutely convinced a long time ago that I was the problem. I thought that interview was the worst of it, but the blows just kept coming.
Chapter 14. She's mad, but she's magic. There's no lie in her fire. Charles Bukowski. Present. Dante. What was I doing here? I didn't have a good answer to that question. Not even for myself. Certainly I had no hope. No more than I ever did. But mostly I couldn't help myself. I could not stay away. She was the siren that called men to their destruction, and I was the first and most eager to answer that deadly call. Every fucking time. Always there was a debate in my mind when I did this, when I gave in and went to her again. Was this heaven or hell? I'd never been able to answer that question, and that was the whole fucking problem. It was both. I'd pulled strings to gain access to her trailer while she was on set. I'd done so promising I was just leaving her a gift and then I was supposed to go. I didn't do that. I set her gift on the small table, then promptly sprawled out on her sofa, loosening my tie, kicking off my shoes. She had to have a break at some point. I had time. I'd wait. I was dozing when the door opened sometime later. I sat up with a start. It was her, and for some reason she didn't call security on me. Instead, she stepped in and closed the door behind her. I took her in, let her presence wash over me, my eyes devouring her in non-consecutive bites. Her face, her legs, her hands, her lips, her feet, her eyes, her shoulders, her ankles, her chest, her neck, my eyes darting all over her like she might disappear. Nothing I'd ever seen could touch her. She was as ravishing as she was unattainable. So heartbreakingly lovely that I ached with it. A familiar gnawing pain started throbbing in my gut, and I let the pain wash over me for a moment, indulged in it. There'd been changes since the last photos I'd seen of her. She'd colored her hair for the part, no doubt, lightened it up just a touch, but enough so that gold streaks overtook and dominated the color, making her some deep, tawny version of blonde. She was dressed simply, outfitted for whatever scene she'd been doing in a soft white button-up blouse tucked into a high-waisted, well-fitted light gray skirt. It was an almost conservative ensemble until you took in the shoes. They were glittering ivory platform stilettos with a peep toe, and she wore them like a weapon. I'd have bet money she'd made friends with the wardrobe person, that she'd had at least some say in those man-eater heels. My eyes shot up to her face as her luscious mouth turned up mockingly at the corners, her fingers going to the front of her blouse, fingering the top button. Without a word, she started to undress. Scarlet. 2 syllables, utter devastation. She undid one button and then the next, revealing silky cleavage, a lacy white bra. I didn't come here for this, I told her, trying my best to sound convincing. We always said our lines, played our parts, but that didn't mean I wasn't sincere. The problem was, no matter my intentions, when it came to her, I did not have one measly ounce of self-control. She smiled, and it was so vicious that it made me flinch. "Once again, you're a fool. What did you come here for, then?" She asked the familiar question with an unfamiliar something in her voice. Something soft, or did I just want to hear that? Something forgiving? No, certainly I must have been imagining that. "I wanted to ask you a question." She'd finished unbuttoning her shirt and shrugged it off nonchalantly. Without pausing, her fingers went to the front clasp of her bra, snapping it open. My jaw went slack, my mind blank. I may have drooled. "What was the question?" she asked, sounding so annoyed that I knew she must have asked it several times before I heard it. But seriously, what did she expect? She was topless now, playing with her incomparable breasts while she spoke, Of course she knew what she was doing. The amused glint in her eye told me that she was messing with me and she loved the results. And even knowing she was toying with me, even knowing she thought it was all a battle, a game of war, none of that calmed my reaction to her. None of it quelled my undying desperation for her. It never had. Just the opposite. Panting, I answered, "I can't concentrate on anything when you do that." She bit her lip, her brows drawing together in a fake coy expression that I fucking ate up with a spoon. Slowly, teasingly, she inched out of her skirt. "Is this better for your concentration? What did you come here for, lover? What was your question?" She continued to strip, so slow and languid that I could hardly stand it. But of course that was the point. She knew what she was doing to me. She always had, at least in this. I tugged at my collar, outright sweating now. Jesus, you're merciless. Her expression did something at that, something vulnerable and twisted. Her smile deepening and hardening, turning both more brittle and more real. "You have no fucking idea. Now ask your question." She was naked now, wearing nothing but her fuck-me heels. Jesus, this woman and her shoe porn would be the end of me. I tried to ask it. I really did, but before I could get a word out, she was straddling me, every inch of her perfect bare skin suddenly within reach of my eager hands. Lust charged through me like a ram. I felt the sharp, sweet ache of it deep in my loins, desire so thick and acute it had turned painful. I'm sure she thought I would touch her breasts, her hips, her ass, her cunt, some part of her outrageously beautiful body that she'd so generously draped over mine. I did not. Both of my trembling hands went up to cup her perfect, oh so beloved face. My voice was somehow steadier than my hands as I asked her my question. "Do you love me at least as much as you hate me?" That was all I needed, just that small aching bit for me. Had I kept even some tiny piece of her love? It made me wretched to ask and worry at her answer. Even so, I had to know. But there was no mercy in her, not today. She smiled, a gentle smile that made me tense up more than any of her venomous ones had. I knew her, knew the hatred she carried around inside of her. I was familiar with it. I'd studied every angle of it, every harsh plane, every bitter hollow, every rough edge. Like everything about her, that hatred was only at home with extremes. I knew where it began, what made it thrive, and why it had decided to focus so squarely on me. I owned my part of it, my share of the blame, but that didn't make it easy or even okay. It was simply a fact of life that I'd had to accept along with many others, while I bided my time. But the smile she gave me then, that one particularly, one almost as gentle as it was condemning, Jesus, I knew in an instant that it meant something had changed, and I was terrified. "I'll answer that," she said in a voice so throaty and resonant it could choke your soul. "I will, but not yet. First, I have a question of my own." I was shaking my head before she'd even finished. No, no, no. There was something too meaningful in her eyes as they raked over my face, like a switch had been flipped, one that should not, could not be turned on. But she knew me too well, knew how to weaken me, what strategy to use to gut me the fastest. Her mouth was my undoing, her lips my own personal heaven and hell. They were a weapon she used seldom but unrepentantly, and they were all the more potent for it. I was a slave to those lips, a willing lamb to slaughter, and when she pressed them to mine, I was already past the point of all resistance. I forgot my question, forgot hers, forgot everything but the simple joy of reveling in her, My weakness and my strength, my purpose and my distraction, my redemption and my undoing. I couldn't even believe I was here with her, that she hadn't had me kicked out the second she found my drunken ass in her trailer. Instead, she was straddling me naked, leaning over me as she kissed and kissed me, unbuttoning my shirt, pushing it aside to rub her naked breasts against my bare chest, how she knew I loved. She completely ignored the chain around my neck and the small objects that hung from it. I was only relieved by that. She usually took exception to it, but I would never take it off. I returned her kiss with fierce abandon, not even trying to hold back. When she spoke, it took a while for me to register her words, even as sharp as they were.
"What have you done to us, Dante?"
She breathed into my mouth.
"What have you done?"
I froze. No, this could not happen. Could not. I was tense, ready for the next blow, the next unanswerable question, but it didn't come. As though she thought she'd said enough, she didn't ask it. Instead, she kissed me again, her hands as busy as her tongue. She kneaded at my abs, working her wicked hands lower, undoing my slacks, freeing me. She kept moving, poising herself over me, rubbing her wet sex against my cock in a way that she knew made me lose half my brain cells. At least half. She gave my lip one last drugging bite and pulled back to glance down at our bodies. My head fell back, and I couldn't keep in an involuntary shudder. I was half convinced she was just teasing me, that she'd leave me like this high and dry. She'd done it before. But that was not what she did. With excruciating slowness and utmost care, she impaled herself on me. We didn't speak for a time. Well, nothing coherent was said at least. Just a lot of calling out names and speaking to God. And begging. There was definitely some begging going on. I'll let you guess which one of us that was. I lay back on my elbows, fists clenched, and watched through heavy lids as she rode me, languidly and thoroughly, all the while wondering if this was just some wonderful, torturous dream. I didn't touch her, didn't trust myself to put my hands on her, and not just come instantly. I didn't want this to be quick. I wanted it to last. It was a fact that there was nothing else I'd rather be doing for as long as I could possibly get away with doing it. My head fell back again, eyes closing as pleasure washed over me in acutely heavy waves. I was so close, but trying my damnedest not to embarrass myself. I wasn't succeeding, about a thrust away from losing the battle, when her voice broke through to me.
"What have you done, Dante?"
Her voice was as silky as it was deadly.
"What lies have you told? Where do they even begin?"
Every muscle in my body tensed. She leaned forward and kissed me. Her mouth and her movements had almost made me forget her questions, or at least had me back to ignoring them when she spoke again.
"What have you been keeping from me?"
came out between kisses. I froze and almost pushed her off me, almost fled. But there was no running from this, or her. Not anymore. Also, she started moving again, in earnest now, working herself on my length with quick, jerky motions that were guaranteed to get me off, and fast. I groaned out a protest. She was distracting me from her words on purpose, using a very sound method to switch my attention, and at first I fought it. But not for long. Not for more than a few seconds, if I were honest. She knew what she was doing. I jackknifed up, bear-hugging her to me as I started to come, pistoning my hips against her, face buried in her neck as I let myself go. I was still jerking inside of her, mid-ejaculation, when she whispered against my ear, her voice filled with gentle malice.
"What secrets are you holding trapped in that manipulative brain of yours?"
It was a sobering enough question that it probably should have stopped me in my tracks, if it were possible. It probably wasn't. I kept her crushed against me as I rubbed out every last twitch. Even with a heavy dose of trepidation mixed in, it was glorious. She had to wriggle against me for a time before I'd let her loose. When I finally did, she shoved her hands against my shoulders, pushing away from me, drawing me out of her with one long, decisive pull. I couldn't help it. I tilted my head down to watch. I shuddered as I noticed the evidence of our passion on her thighs. It was a sight to behold if you're animal enough to like that sort of thing. I certainly am. She moved away from me without another word, striding naked into the bathroom.